The palace wasn't shaken by a crown, a royal title, or even the throne itself. It was shaken by a single sapphire ring, a ring carrying Princess Diana's memory, Catherine's quiet responsibility, Prince William's lifelong grief, and Camilla's deepest sense of exclusion. Everything changed the moment Prince William walked into the royal vault and reclaimed it. The ring had recently been placed inside the vault during a confidential review involving Diana's personal heirlooms and other historic royal treasures. But now William had arrived with one clear purpose: to take it back. Camilla learned the outcome through an official palace notification. Her request to access the ring had been formally declined. She immediately understood that this wasn't a routine administrative delay or a scheduling issue. It was a firm decision. Another door had quietly been closed. For years, Camilla had tried to establish her place within the royal family without constantly being compared to Diana. Yet that sapphire ring remained the one symbol that refused to move beyond the past. When the vault officer approached carrying the velvet ring case with both hands, the atmosphere grew even heavier. A senior palace official quietly confirmed that William's authority over Diana's sapphire had been formally recognized above every competing request. Even after Diana's passing, her presence still seemed to fill the corridor. As the case was placed into William's hands, something inside the palace seemed to change forever. He held it carefully, pausing for a brief moment as memories rushed back. Camilla's denied request was only the beginning. One sapphire ring seemed to carry the weight of 4 different lives. For Diana, it represented a promise that eventually became heartbreak. For Catherine, it became a responsibility she never asked for but willingly accepted. For William, it remained one of the last visible connections to the mother he lost far too soon. And for Camilla, it stood as the one royal symbol that never fully welcomed her. That was why the decision surrounding the vault carried such emotional force. William had always known the sapphire was unlike any other royal jewel. Over the years, he had watched it become a worldwide symbol of love, loss, loyalty, and remembrance. An heirloom is normally something passed from one generation to the next. But Diana's sapphire had grown far beyond that definition. For millions of people, it represented Diana's courage and everything she endured. For William, every flash of its deep blue stone reminded him of his mother. And for Catherine, wearing the ring meant carrying a legacy that the world never stopped watching. Every appearance, every photograph, and every public event invited comparisons that no one could completely escape. Yet Catherine understood that responsibility from the very beginning. She never saw the sapphire as a piece of status or privilege. She saw it as something that deserved care and respect. Before the vault process officially began, William shared a quiet conversation with Catherine. His voice remained calm, but the emotion beneath his words was impossible to hide. He admitted that he could never allow Diana's memory to become nothing more than another palace possession. Not after everything his family had experienced. Catherine listened carefully without interrupting. She didn't argue. She didn't offer dramatic reassurance. Instead, she answered with quiet understanding. In that moment, William realized she wasn't protecting the ring because of what it represented for her. She was protecting it because she understood what it represented for Diana. Meanwhile, Camilla's request had already begun changing the atmosphere inside the palace. Her office described the request as part of an inventory review, a routine examination of valuable royal items and their official records. On paper, it sounded perfectly ordinary. But inside palace walls, very few believed the matter was that simple. Everyone understood that Diana's sapphire occupied a unique place in royal history, one that official procedures could never completely separate from emotion. To Camilla, being refused access felt like another reminder that there would always be one chapter of royal history where she could never truly belong. To William, approving that request would have crossed a line he simply could not accept. King Charles found himself caught painfully between both sides. He recognized Camilla's disappointment. He also recognized his son's grief. Neither could be dismissed. Remaining neutral no longer seemed possible. Supporting Camilla risked reopening William's deepest wounds. Supporting William would almost certainly leave Camilla feeling publicly rejected once again. Soon, everyone understood that a private meeting would become unavoidable. The future of Diana's sapphire, and everything it represented, was about to be discussed behind closed palace doors. The moment that changed everything didn't happen inside the royal vault. It began several weeks earlier during a private family gathering, where a single comment quietly altered the atmosphere. Camilla looked toward Diana's sapphire ring and made a remark that William never forgot. Her words were calm, carefully spoken, and easy to overlook. But to William, they crossed a line. From that moment forward, he no longer believed the ring was completely protected. The private memorial at Kensington Palace had been arranged to honor Princess Diana away from public attention. Only close family members attended, allowing them to remember her life without cameras or official ceremonies. A memorial is simply a gathering held to remember someone who has passed away. For William, however, this occasion meant far more than tradition. Diana's memory continued to shape his family in ways no royal document ever could. Catherine stood quietly beside him, wearing Diana's sapphire with grace and deep respect. She had always understood the responsibility that came with it. Then Camilla glanced toward the ring and casually described it as part of the Crown's shared collection. To many in the room, the sentence sounded harmless. To William, it sounded entirely different. He heard it as though one of the most personal symbols of his mother's life had suddenly become just another palace possession. Catherine lowered her eyes without saying a word. She didn't need to speak. William already knew she had felt exactly what he had. Diana's ring had never represented ordinary royal property. Reducing it to part of a shared collection made years of love, sacrifice, and heartbreak feel smaller than they truly were. Almost instinctively, Catherine's fingers tightened slightly around the sapphire. It was only a tiny movement, but William noticed. That single gesture told him everything. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting Diana's memory. King Charles sensed the tension almost immediately and attempted to ease the atmosphere. His carefully chosen words were meant to calm everyone. Instead, they only made the silence feel heavier. Because if Diana's sapphire became nothing more than institutional property, then one day it could be reviewed, transferred, or handled by people who had never carried the grief attached to it. Camilla offered no further explanation. Her silence allowed the remark to linger in everyone's mind. Once the ceremony ended, William quietly approached one of his senior palace advisors. That calmness made every word even more powerful. He explained that the ring was not a family trophy. It wasn't simply another royal jewel to be catalogued, reviewed, or passed through official procedures. It carried his mother's story. And Catherine had worn it with dignity because she had never tried to replace the woman who came before her. Camilla repeated that her office had requested access only as part of a routine inventory review. But William quietly revealed something she hadn't expected. According to the documented records from the Vault Office, her staff had requested broader heirloom access even before the Kensington Memorial. That detail changed the entire discussion. For a brief moment, Camilla had no answer. The explanation she had relied upon no longer carried the same weight. William never raised his voice. He didn't accuse her publicly. Instead, he drew a clear boundary. The decision would remain. Diana's sapphire would stay under his protection. No future request involving the ring would move forward without his direct approval. Camilla looked deeply hurt. William looked completely certain. Not angry. Not triumphant. Simply determined. Nearby, King Charles already understood that this disagreement had grown beyond personal feelings. It was now about authority. And inside the monarchy, authority always carries consequences. Camilla quietly left the room. William remained behind for a few moments, collecting himself before walking away. He knew there would be no turning back after this. Soon afterward, Charles realized the conflict was no longer centered on emotion alone. The question had become far more significant. Who ultimately had the power to decide the future of Diana's legacy? The monarchy may be built on centuries of tradition, but behind every ceremony stands one simple truth. Power is often decided by a signature. Away from public appearances and polished speeches, a single written approval can permanently change the course of royal history. That morning, King Charles sat alone with the vault authorization file resting in front of him. He understood exactly what the document represented. Signing it would strengthen William's authority, but it would also leave Camilla feeling rejected once again. For several moments, Charles quietly read each page without speaking. Every sentence seemed to pull him back through years of family history. The authorization document outlined who would officially control access to Diana's sapphire ring. It identified the jewel as a protected heirloom placed under the care of William and Catherine's household. That classification changed everything. From that point forward, the ring would no longer fall under ordinary ceremonial review. Instead, decisions involving it would rest with the future king's household. Camilla's position within the monarchy would no longer automatically grant her access. Charles immediately recognized what that meant. This wasn't simply another administrative update. It was an acknowledgement that some parts of Diana's legacy remained too personal to be governed by routine palace procedure. Outside the office, William waited quietly. His face remained composed, but inside he understood that one signature could either secure everything or leave the matter vulnerable to future challenges. Although he had already reclaimed the sapphire from the vault, the long-term protection still depended upon his father's approval. Without it, future requests could eventually reopen the issue through palace administration. Catherine's place was equally important. Even though she wasn't present, her connection to the ring had become part of its protection. William carried his mother's memory. Catherine carried that memory into the future. Charles slowly reached for the pen. For a brief moment, he placed it back on the desk. The hesitation spoke louder than words. His thoughts turned toward Camilla and everything she had endured over the years. He knew this decision would feel deeply personal to her. Then his mind returned to Diana, to William, to the pain that had never completely disappeared. After a long silence, Charles picked up the pen once again. This time, he signed. No announcement followed. No dramatic speech. Only ink settling onto paper. And with it, a boundary became official. Within minutes, senior palace staff carried out the decision. Camilla's office was quietly removed from the authorized access list connected to Diana's protected heirlooms. There was no public statement.
No ceremony. No explanation.
The update simply took effect. Its silence made it feel even more final. Soon afterward, William received formal confirmation. A confidential palace note informed him that the authorization had been completed. For the first time since the dispute began, legal authority now matched his personal determination. Diana's sapphire was officially protected. Camilla learned the outcome differently. Before Charles had the opportunity to speak with her personally, an official palace notice reached her office. She read the decision alone. The words were polite, professional, carefully written, but their meaning could not be mistaken. What had started as a disagreement over access had now become an official ruling. And Camilla understood immediately that the consequences extended far beyond one sapphire ring. Inside the palace, nothing would feel quite the same again. Camilla didn't react with anger when the official notice reached her. That was what made the moment so powerful. She read the document once. Then she read it again. Each line seemed to confirm the fear she had carried for years. Denied. Restricted. Excluded. Somewhere inside Windsor Castle, a secure vault door had been closed. But inside Camilla's heart, another door quietly closed as well. The palace notice officially confirmed that her request to access Diana-related heirlooms had been refused. On paper, it was simply an administrative decision. In reality, it carried a much deeper meaning. A vault item is any royal object protected under controlled security and limited authorization. Yet Diana's sapphire had never been viewed as just another royal possession. It represented memory, loyalty, and a connection to Princess Diana that millions of people around the world still held close. The notice never criticized Camilla directly. That almost made it harder to accept. Instead, it calmly established a boundary, placing her outside one part of royal history that she could never fully enter. Across the palace, everyday procedures quietly began reflecting the new decision. Royal protocol, the system of rules governing official responsibilities and protected heirlooms, was adjusted without fanfare. From that day forward, any inquiry involving Diana's sapphire would be directed through William's household. Catherine's role in safeguarding the ring was also formally acknowledged. Her connection to the sapphire had become part of its official protection. William had achieved what he set out to do. Even so, victories inside the monarchy rarely arrive without leaving someone else wounded. Later that evening, Camilla sat alone in silence.
No cameras. No advisors.
No public statements. Only her thoughts. For years she had endured comparisons to Diana. She had accepted criticism, harsh headlines, and public judgment. But this decision felt different. The palace itself had now drawn a line. Not emotionally. Officially. That realization hurt more than gossip ever could. She believed history still contained one room where she would never truly belong. When Charles finally came to speak with her, his gentle words offered little comfort. Camilla believed the damage had already been done. From her perspective, he had approved the very decision that left her standing outside the boundary. Charles wanted her to understand William's grief. Camilla wanted Charles to understand her own. Neither found the words they needed. The silence between them only grew heavier. Not through argument, but through disappointment. At almost the same time, William received another confidential message from palace staff. Camilla's office had withdrawn all further communication regarding the vault review. He understood immediately that the silence wasn't acceptance. It was hurt. Soon afterward, Catherine learned that Diana Sapphire was once again fully protected. Her response wasn't celebration. It was quiet relief mixed with sadness. She understood that preserving the ring had come with emotional consequences for everyone involved. William realized the legal process was finally complete. The paperwork had ended. The official decisions had been made. But emotionally, one final conversation still remained. Not with palace officials. Not with the king. Only with Catherine. Away from titles, formal duties, and royal tradition. Just a husband. A wife. And the sapphire that had survived love, loss, heartbreak, and history itself. There were no palace advisors now. No confidential files. No vault officials. Only William, Catherine, and the sapphire ring that had traveled through decades of love, heartbreak, loss, and remembrance. For the first time since the dispute began, royal titles no longer mattered. It was simply a husband trying to protect his wife and a son trying to honor his mother's memory. After the vault transfer was officially completed, William quietly brought the ring case to Catherine. The transfer itself was a formal administrative process, moving the sapphire into a protected access category under William's household. But to him, it never felt like paperwork. It felt like bringing something precious home. Catherine understood that without a single explanation. She never asked whether every document had been signed. She looked only at William. Behind his calm expression, she could still see the pain he had carried throughout the entire process. For the first time, William admitted what he had hidden from everyone else. Reclaiming the sapphire had forced him to relive the loss of his mother once again. He believed he had simply been protecting a family heirloom. Instead, every step had taken him back to the young boy who still remembered saying goodbye to Diana. Catherine listened quietly, just as she always had. She knew the sapphire represented far more than royal tradition. It carried memory. It carried grief. And it carried the hope that one family's greatest pain could still be treated with dignity. After a long silence, Catherine gently told William something that had remained in her heart for years. She explained that wearing Diana's ring had never made her feel like she was replacing Diana. Instead, it reminded her every day of the responsibility to honor the woman who came before her. The world often compared them. She never did. To Catherine, the sapphire wasn't a symbol of competition. It was a promise of respect. Hearing those words brought William a sense of peace he hadn't expected. He finally understood why Catherine had always carried the burden with such quiet strength. She had never tried to make Diana's story her own. She had simply protected it. William then shared the real reason behind his decision. His actions had never been motivated by anger toward Camilla. The turning point had been that private memorial at Kensington. One carefully chosen sentence had made him fear that Diana's memory was slowly becoming another piece of palace administration instead of remaining something deeply personal. The institution, the network of royal offices, traditions, and official procedures, could preserve history. But it could never preserve a son's grief. Catherine immediately understood why that distinction mattered so much. If Diana Sapphire ever became nothing more than another royal asset, then its emotional meaning could slowly disappear beneath paperwork and protocol. Without another word, Catherine gently closed the velvet ring case. That simple gesture changed everything. The sapphire had been protected, but it had never been used as a weapon. Camilla had been refused access. Yet Catherine found no satisfaction in someone else's disappointment. William had secured the future of the ring. Still, there was no feeling of victory on his face. Only relief. The palace had finally settled the matter. But outside its gates, the story was only beginning. Before long, the public would discover what had happened. And the meaning of Diana Sapphire would once again be decided far beyond the palace walls. By the following morning, the story had spread far beyond the palace walls. The public didn't see a discussion about vault procedures or royal paperwork. They saw a son protecting his mother's memory. And they saw a boundary that many believed should never have been crossed. One newspaper captured the national mood with a striking front page. Against a black background appeared Diana's famous blue sapphire beneath one unforgettable headline: "William brings Diana home." Within hours, the palace realized it had lost control of the public narrative. What had begun as an internal decision over a protected heirloom quickly became a national conversation. The vault ruling, which officially placed Diana's sapphire under William and Catherine's protected authority, was no longer viewed as a simple administrative matter. To millions, the ring had always represented Diana herself. It carried memories of her kindness, her struggles, and the emotional connection the public still felt decades later. Camilla's denied request only intensified those emotions. Television presenters didn't describe the event as an update to palace protocol. Instead, they portrayed it as a son standing up for his mother's legacy. Outside Kensington Palace, small groups of people quietly gathered throughout the day. Some carried photographs of Diana. Others simply stood in silence. Many spoke William's name with admiration. It wasn't a celebration against Camilla. It was an expression of loyalty toward Diana's memory. That quiet support spoke louder than any public protest. Camilla later saw the newspaper headlines in private. The image of the sapphire remained fixed on the page. So did the message. She understood that the public wasn't only reacting to an official decision. They were delivering their own emotional verdict. Years of trying to earn acceptance suddenly felt overshadowed by one familiar symbol. No matter how much time had passed, Diana's memory still occupied a place no one else could replace. Meanwhile, William heard the morning news before the palace released any formal statement. One broadcaster described the decision as the clearest line William had ever drawn in defense of his mother's legacy. Those words stayed with him. He had never wanted the sapphire to become a weapon in a family dispute. He had only wanted it protected. When palace advisors drafted an official statement, William quietly rejected the first version. It described the sapphire as though it was simply another valuable royal asset. To him, that wording missed the entire point. The ring wasn't valuable because of its jewels. It was valuable because of the life connected to it. King Charles watched public reaction grow stronger throughout the day. Only then did he fully realize the significance of the document he had signed. His decision had done far more than regulate access. It had acknowledged that Diana's memory continued to shape the royal family in ways no official title could erase. William had protected the ring. Catherine had protected its dignity. Camilla had been left outside one deeply personal chapter of royal history. And Charles had accepted that some memories could never be governed by protocol alone. As public attention slowly settled, one truth remained impossible to ignore. The sapphire had not weakened the monarchy. It had revealed where its deepest emotional boundaries still existed. William hadn't simply reclaimed a royal heirloom. He had protected the line between family memory and institutional authority. Catherine never emerged as Diana's replacement. Instead, she became the careful guardian of a legacy she had always treated with humility. Camilla remained queen consort. Yet she also discovered that rank alone could never grant ownership over every part of royal history. Charles, perhaps more than anyone, finally understood the price of remaining silent for too long. When everything was over, William accepted the outcome with quiet peace. Diana's sapphire would remain under the protection of William and Catherine, safeguarded from future uncertainty and treated as far more than another royal possession. It would stand as a lasting reminder of memory, loss, respect, and family. Catherine carried that responsibility with grace rather than triumph. She never believed the sapphire made her equal to Diana. She believed it challenged her to honor Diana's memory with dignity every single day. Charles also recognized what his signature had truly accomplished. It wasn't simply a legal decision. It was an acknowledgement that some wounds remained too personal for royal procedure to erase. And although Camilla continued fulfilling her role within the monarchy, she accepted that Diana's sapphire belonged to a story that would never truly become hers. The vault door was now closed. The sapphire was protected. The decision had been made. For William, it was never about winning. It was about preserving the memory of his mother. For Catherine, it was about carrying that memory with respect. And for the monarchy, it became a reminder that some legacies cannot be rewritten, only protected. Thank you for watching.